Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. I very welcome my friends and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to Tuesday's edition of the dceu Daily. So today we're exposing Mark Hughes. Mark Hughes is a pundit. Mark Hughes writes about movies. Now, Mark Hughes, for me, has always been the enemy of the dceu. He's been very negative about the movies that we love. And also, he was the one months ago saying that the Snyder Cut does not exist. But a few weeks ago, things had changed. Mark Hughes came out apologising about his stance about the dceu and saying there was no Snyder Cut, that he'd recently found out that there indeed was a 90% completed Snyder Cut, right? But it gets better than this, that it was, 165 minutes long. Or that's how he alleged anyway. Now, we know there's been talk of 165, but there's always been 214 minutes. Yes, we're talking about run times. Now, this discussion has split the fucking fandom. It's like John Aaron Garza's $40 million to complete the Snyder Cut. I do like John, by the way, but a lot of people don't like him anymore because of what he's said. But at the end of the day, I can still like someone. If that bothers you, you know where the door is, basically. But let's talk about Mark Hughes in this alleged 165 minutes. Now, Zack Snyder was asked by someone on Vero, and he said, what's 165? Which probably means it's well, look, I don't know what it means, to be honest, because let's look at why all of a sudden Mark Hughes has gone from the enemy of the DCU to a friend, saying he regrets his comments about saying there's no Snyder Cut. Well, we all know our good friend Jay Oliver, very creative, very talented. He's kind of sat people back down who said there's no Snyder Cut or slated the kind of universe. Jay Oliver is actually working with Mark Hughes. They're trying to develop a comic book, a really old comic book, via GoFundMe to a TV series, I think, and please correct me in the comments down below if I'm mistaken. So they've started working together, very, very odd. So, of course, Mark Hughes and Jay have spoken, and Jay's probably said to him, and we do, I'm very popular with the DCEU audience. He must have done. He goes, we need these guys to make this a success. So you better go and do a charm offensive. Now, I know about one of the cuts of Justice League. Jay may have said to him, 165 minutes, why don't you feed them that? Why don't you apologise for what you've said? All of a sudden, we've got a ready-made fan base. Do you understand? As great as Jay Oliver is and talented, these people are interested in making money, in garnering us as a vessel to use us. No, I'm sorry. I don't know Jay Oliver. I don't know that he's a perfect human being with perfect morals. There's no such thing, by the way. But I think this is what happened. This is why Mark Hughes started apologising. I thought it was very odd from the very beginning. He's trying to utilise us as a fan base for what? The project they're working on. And it's absolutely disgusting. I respect Jay Oliver. Jay Oliver is a very talented guy who's worked on a lot of DC content, animated and live action. He's brilliant. I respect him that he's gone onto Twitter and he's defended people. But let's not get this wrong. The reason Hughes came out about 165 minutes is to for us to say, oh, look, he's given us information. He's telling us there's a 165-minute Justice League movie, only 90% done. Isn't that exciting? But then he created something else, because we always thought that the Snyder Cut was a 214-minute runtime. But unlike most of you, I'm not particularly very passionate in the aspect of saying, I spoke about this the other day, and I'd obviously rather the longer version. But 165 minutes is still a very long film. But ultimately, Zack isn't going to allow a movie to be released which isn't his complete vision. So I don't know what all this divisive chatter is all about. If we do get the Snyder Cut, which of course is very unlikely at this point, but we're still fighting for it and say we should be, Zack will make sure he puts together, and he has an agreement with Warner Bros. To put together his full vision of the film. So there's nothing to worry about there. But I do think there's a 165-minute cut. Could it be, though, that it's not Zack's cut, and in fact it's Joss Whedon's cut? Now, a couple of people have said this before. It's all very, very odd. But let me be clear to you. Mark Hughes' film, as he calls himself, is not a friend of a DCEU fan. Not one DCEU fan. He's not your friend. He's using you because he and J. Oliver are working on a project and they want you to make that project money. So he threw you a bone. A man who was an enemy. A man who said to me that after the Justice League opening, that Justice League, the DCEU, the DC films would be cancelled and be rebooted. Mark, I'm still waiting. So me and Mark had a heated debate. He blocked me on Twitter. I never swore at him. I was never aggressive. I may have repeated myself a couple of times. You do in these debates, don't you? I didn't do anything. And he says, if you carry on, I'm going to block you. So, of course, I carried on. And he blocked me. I think if you block someone because you disagree with them. Now, basically, if someone gets on your nerves, and maybe I was getting on his nerves and he decided to block me or mute me, don't care. But when you can't handle an opposite opinion, then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, you decide you want to be friends with the DCEU fandom, right? You use them because you're doing a project with a much-loved figure who's worked on those movies, right? And that's the problem. Being used, seeing DCEU, my fellow DCEU fans who come in, around 100 of you come in to watch these videos. So I care about you. I talk to you sometimes in the comments, don't I? Right? Or I at least press like and stuff like that and appreciate what you're contributing to the channel, right? But this guy's come in and offered you this nugget of 165 minutes. And of course, you bit his hand off. It's amazing. It's 90% done. It's 165 minutes, but we want the 214. So for me, it isn't a question of 165 or 214. I think we will get the 214 because I'm not sure if 165 is actually even the Snyder cut. I wouldn't trust Mark Hughes as far as I could throw him, as far as I could spit. He's not a friend of film. He talks about film. He takes from film. He takes from film fans. But a person who blocks a movie consumer because he doesn't agree with him isn't a friend. Isn't someone we should be following on Twitter. So if you followed him because he's made a few comments about 165, my advice to you right now is to go onto Twitter and unfollow him. He's not your friend. He is using you, hoping this misinformation he has given you will garner you, that he can utilize you to watch his and J. Oliver's new kind of comic book adaptation they're doing for TV, right? And it's not even guaranteed they can get it off. They're working together, right? I don't understand how these two people are working together because apparently, according to J. Oliver, Mark Hughes is such a talented man. Really? Really? You see, the thing is, sometimes you judge people on association, and I've always had great respect for Jay, and I always will. But at the end of the day, when you associate yourself with one of the enemies of the DCEU, one of the enemies of the DCEU fandom, and that's what Mark Hughes is. Everyone's saying, oh, people have said things in the past, he's apologised. Isn't that big of him? He's using you. He's manipulating you. Don't you understand? Don't you get it? Don't you see what's going on here? Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. And just a quick little update. James Gunn was asked over on Twitter if Batman would be in the Suicide Squad. And he said, if you want to see Batman, you can see him in the Batman in a couple of years' time. So that sounds like a no. But look, you don't know. You don't know what they're up to. Showrunners and film directors lie all the time. If there is a cameo, he wasn't going to announce it then. I suspect something. We may see something in the Suicide Squad. I think Batman will maybe have a cameo. Batman is very important to that franchise. And I think they are trying to create the Bat family, especially with Batgirl being developed now. We know the script has been totally done by Christina Hodgson too. So that's interesting, but don't be a bit too downbeat. And to be honest with you, I'm just really excited that we've got James Gunn doing it. James Gunn is a big graphic novel Suicide Squad fan, so he knows this world. He knows these characters, so I'm very, very excited. So please comment down below. Please let me know what you think about my opinions of Mark Hughes and J. Oliver working together, and my opinions of 165 versus 214. Comment down below. Please like, share, and subscribe.